Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. It's your last day before spring break. I just wanted to go through a couple of things with dividing decimals. I hadn't done videos this week because it was an all review, and Mr. Mack had already made those. But since this is a new thing, dividing decimals, I wanted to show you guys a couple of things. So here is just the steps. So the biggest thing with dividing decimals is if you have a decimal in the divisor, so here there's decimals in the divisor, you can't do the division. So the first thing you have to do is you have to change the divisor. It says up here, change your divisor to a whole number by moving the decimal point to the right until after the last digit. So really what they're doing here is they're timesing 1 and 4/10, timesing it by 10 to change the place value so that it becomes a 14. So they did that over here. They changed that to 14. So if we do that to the one side of a division problem, we have to do it to the other side because you don't want to change the actual problem. You're just changing where the decimal places are. So if we're timesing this side by 10, we're going to times this side by 10. So you're moving both the divisor and the dividend, the decimal over one spot. So here we have 14. Here we had 1 and 4/10. On the dividend, we had 3 and 64 hundredths. Now we have 36 and 4/10. So it's the same thing multiplied by 10. So now that we've done that step, now we can actually solve the problem. So they've solved the problem here. It's okay for it to have a decimal in the dividend. You would just move the decimal point up, straight up to wherever place value it is, which is why it's really important to make sure that your numbers above the division problem stay where they need to go. So for example, 14 goes into 36 2 times, so that 2 needs to go right above the 6 in the 36. So then we have 36 minus 28 is 8. They brought down the 4. The decimal point goes right here because it just goes straight up where it was. All right, I wanted to show you these two different problems. They look very similar, but there's one big difference. We also wanted to show you this because on Google Forms, they're all written like this because we had to write them like this. But I wanted to remind you guys that this here is your dividend, and this is your divisor. So that goes outside. So if I were to write this problem, I would write 0.2 on the outside, then 1 and 378 thousandths. So first thing I have to do is I have to get rid of the decimal in the divisor. You always want to start here because this is where you can have your decimal. So I'm going to have to move the decimal place one spot so it's just a whole number. So that's really just multiplying it by 10 because I'm making it 2/10 I'm making 2/10 into just 2. So if I do that here, I have to do the same thing here. So now my decimal point is right here. So if I were to rewrite the problem, this, it's a really big 3. This would look like this, and your decimal point's here because you moved it that one spot. So your decimal point just gets moved right up here. So it's going to stay there in the problem. So now if I do this problem, I would do 2 goes into 13 6 times. That becomes 12. Into 1. 2 goes into 17 8 times. So your 8 needs to go above the 7. So it goes on the other side of the decimal because your decimal point's right here. And then 2 goes in, that's an 18. 2 goes into 18 9 times. So that's my answer, 6 and 89 hundredths. So the big difference with this problem here is instead of you moving the decimal point 1 spot, you would actually be moving it 2 spots because you want to get it out of the decimals. You want to make it a whole number. So if I was going to do this problem, still rewrite it like this. Okay, so my decimal point actually would have to move 2 spots here. In order for this to be a 2, you would need to times it by 1,000, or sorry, times it by 100, because 100 has those 2 zeros. So it's really like timesing it by 100. So if you're doing that here, you're going to do it again in the dividend as well. So you're actually moving this 2 spots backwards. So now this number becomes 137 and 8/10 divided by 2. It's different than this one up here because this was 2/10 instead of 200ths. This is a 13, this will be 137. Okay, so if I rewrote the problem, this is what it would look like for this problem here. The decimal place is here because you're timesing it by 100. So the 2 would go into 13. The same thing, it would go in 6 times. So 6 goes here. So then it's 2 goes into 17 and it goes in 8 times. So I'm still putting the 8 right above the 7. And that would be, oh, I ran out of space. So then that would be 18 down there because I'm bringing down the 8. So the biggest thing is here, the decimal point is right here. So my decimal point is going to be here, and then the 9 is going to be out here. So now I have 68 and 9/10. That is different than this number up here, but it makes sense because this one is divided by 200ths and this one's divided by 2/10. Okay, last thing I wanted to show you with dividing decimals is what do you do when you have a remainder? Because previously you guys have been able to write like R1 like you did yesterday. With fractions, I've showed you how to make it into a fraction or make it into a mixed number. But for decimals, let me show you what you would do. So this problem, okay, so this problem, again, we have to get the decimal out of the divisor. So you would times it by 10 or move the decimal spot over 1 time to the right. Here, you're going to do the same thing. So you really get this problem over here. You get 15 divided by 2. That's the same thing. So 2 doesn't go into 15 equally. It goes in 7 times. And then we would have 14 as your answer there. And we have 1. So at this point, I have showed you guys with fractions that the answer would be 7 and 1/2. But it's not going to be 7.1, which I've gotten a lot of you guys guessing before on that. What you would do with this is you would put a decimal point right here, because there's always a hidden decimal point right after the ones place. And then you're just going to add a 0. Because remember, you can add as many zeros as you want to the end. We just don't keep them there. So, but then you bring the 0 down here, and you've got 10. So 2 goes into 10 5 times, but you need to remember this decimal point moves up here. So that would be 5 times 10. The remainder is now 0. So now we can end our problem because our remainder is 0. With decimals, you keep going until you get a remainder of 0. So this problem now makes sense if you think about it as money. So if you had $15 and half of 15, you needed to give half to your friend and you kept half, then you would get an answer of $7.50. It's the same thing as 7 1/2. But this is how you would do it with remainders for decimals. I think there's one on there that you have to do on the Google Sheets. The rest of them you should not have to add the 0. But if you need a remainder, you add a 0 to the end of the actual dividend and then just bring the 0 down and add that to your answer. All right, I hope these videos helped you today. I hope you guys have a wonderful spring break, and I'll see you when you get back, or talk to you guys when you get back. We're going to get started on geometry when we get back. All right, see you guys.